Tonight on Unsolved Mysteries.
A Florida woman meets a man of her dreams. Soon they chart a life together, sailing around the world. But suddenly she vanishes. Could her boyfriend have had anything to do with her disappearance? A decaying marriage. A shocking case of arson. A wife is dead, and her husband is on the run. A California teenager's vacation to Carson City, Nevada sparks a seemingly innocent summer romance. Does that relationship lead to her unexplained death just days later? What happened to Natasha? A young woman working 2 jobs struggles to support her daughter. Then when she ends a relationship with a possessive man, she ends up dead. Now police need your help to find her alleged killer, Michael Alfonso. Join me. Perhaps you hold the key. Perhaps you may be able to help solve the mystery. In April 1998, 51-year-old Colleen Wood moved from Dayton, Ohio to Boca Raton, Florida. Living in the Sunshine State was a culmination of a lifelong dream. The charming former high school homecoming queen went to work at Lighthouse Point Marina as office manager.
Pretty tempting.
Then in December 2000, following a whirlwind romance with a former professional race driver and Wall Street wizard named John Paul, Colleen suddenly vanished without a trace. To those who know her, it is unimaginable that she would not call or write. In the months following Colleen Wood's disappearance, the mystery only deepened, and police are baffled. There is no body, no suicide note, and no evidence of foul play. In fact, legally, there is no crime and no suspect. While Colleen is listed as a missing person by Fort Lauderdale police, her family and friends fear the worst. Detectives would like to talk to one person who might be able to shed some light on Colleen's fate, John Paul. But months after Colleen was last seen, he too mysteriously disappeared.
Well, here she is, my island girl.
Sometime in early 2000, Colleen Wood, a divorced mother of 2 grown kids, decided to give Cupid another chance.
Wow. When you said you had a sailboat, I never imagined she'd be this big.
Yeah. Big enough to sail the Atlantic and the Pacific.
My mother met John Paul through a personal ad looking for a sailing companion. And she was impressed with his credentials. He said he had an MBA from Harvard. And in the racing circle, he was early famous.
Like to see the cabin?
And he was also reputed to be wealthy due to his success in the ownership of a mutual fund company.
Within a few months of their first date, Colleen and John had become inseparable. One evening, following an intimate dinner, Colleen shared some of her hopes and dreams.
Here's to dreams.
Here's to our dreams.
What is it that you'd like to do that you've never done before?
Well, I've always thought it'd be pretty fun to sail around the world.
Well, why don't we do that?
Colleen was surprised and thrilled when John suggested they make the voyage together aboard his 55-foot schooner Island Girl. It was a wild adventure torn from the pages of a steamy romance novel. Within a few weeks, Colleen had sold her condominium and entrusted John with investing the net proceeds, $43,000. A short time later, she moved in with him aboard Island Girl, then quit her job.
Yeah, would you get some teak oil? Thanks.
I was very, very shocked when Colleen told me that she was leaving. I personally was very concerned about her selling all of her assets to take this trip.
Colleen, are you sure about this? I mean, selling your car and your condo and everything?
Seems a little risky putting all your eggs in one basket.
I know, but you know what? This is something I've always wanted to do. Let's face it, I'm not getting any younger. Might be the only chance I have.
You wanna take a break?
Yeah, in a minute. I gotta call Mike before I forget about it.
On December 3rd, 2000, Colleen placed a call to her son in Ohio.
Hey, Mike, it's Mom.
She told him Island Girl was setting sail in a few weeks and she would be in touch soon.
I keep hoping if I ignore them.
According to Maureen Canada, she spoke to Colleen about 10 days later, on December 13th or 14th, to invite her to the office Christmas party.
I called her cell phone number, and she happened to be in Key West at a bar with John Paul. She sounded fine. She sounded like she was having a good time.
Great, so you can make the party. All right, I'll see you Tuesday. Bye.
Tuesday, the party came and went, and she didn't show up. But I just assumed that something happened where there was possibly rough seas and they couldn't make it back on the boat.
She didn't call us for Christmas Eve, and after New Year, everyone was really worried. Friends and family were asking, haven't you heard? Because we know she would have called. I tried to call her on her cell phone, and the account had been closed.
Michael immediately contacted the police in Florida, but there was no evidence of any crime. Days turned to weeks, then months. Still, there was no sign of Colleen Wood.
We spent the best part of January and February calling back and forth with the Coast Guard and the FCC, just trying to, in some way, identify and locate this boat.
Back in Ohio, Colleen's son searched the internet in hopes of finding an address or phone number for John Paul. What he discovered gave him grave concerns.
I ran across an article that said that he had served time in prison, that he went to a federal penitentiary for approximately 15 years, serving time for an attempted murder. I'm still thinking they're on a boat, but I'm thinking she's on a boat with a killer, or a possible killer.
It turned out Colleen's boyfriend was a mastermind behind a drug smuggling ring in the early 80s and tried to kill his partner in crime for allegedly ratting him out. John Paul was paroled in 1999 and met Colleen less than a year later. His plan to sail around the world was in direct violation of his parole. Family and friends were certain Colleen knew nothing about John Paul's past. However, his prison record wasn't the only thing that had some people troubled. John would later give 3 different accounts of his relationship with Colleen, which he says ended on the rocks. John allegedly told version 1 to his daughter. According to Michael, she said Colleen had become irate over an incident involving one of her father's old girlfriends and ended the relationship.
When I heard that she had broken up in December, I was panicked, completely panicked.
Michael pleaded with John Paul's daughter to have her father call him. 3 days later, he did, and a second version of the story emerged.
He told me that they had an argument. He said he didn't remember what it was about. But after the argument, she left the boat, and then she came back with her football player boyfriend. She gathered all of her belongings, and she left the boat, and he hasn't seen her since. I filed a missing persons report immediately with the Fort Lauderdale Police Department.
In April 2001, some 4 months after Colleen was last heard from, detectives Mark Shotwell and Al Stone were assigned to the case. Their investigation quickly led to some suspicious activity on Colleen's credit cards.
In a 2-month period between mid-December to mid-February, in excess of 80 transactions, cash advancements totaling over $40,000 had occurred on Colleen Wood's cards. We were able to come up with good, solid physical evidence that not only did Colleen Wood not make any of the transactions, they were not made with her consent.
If Colleen wasn't withdrawing cash from the ATMs, then who was? The police are still investigating and would only say it was a woman, perhaps more than one. Also raising suspicion were 2 ads that appeared in a local newspaper.
Both of these ads were placed in the name of Colleen Wood using her credit cards. Both of the ads were ordered by a male. The first ad that ran in early December was in the help wanted section looking for a first mate on the boat. The second ad that ran mid-December was in the romance male seeking female section.
Had the ads been placed by John Paul, detectives weren't sure. They did know the second ad began running on December 16, 2000, about the same time Maureen Canada had spoken to Colleen by phone. According to Maureen, Colleen told her then that she was partying with John in Key West, and everything was fine. Detectives Shotwell and Stone were anxious to hear about the events of December 2000 from John Paul himself. They finally tracked him down in May 2001. It was then, according to detectives, that John offered his third version of the breakup with Colleen.
I'd like to ask you a few questions about Colleen Wood.
Sure, how can I help you?
Have you heard from her lately?
Oh, well, no, I can't help you there. I haven't seen.
John Paul said that in mid-December, he and Colleen had a large fight over money, that Colleen Wood owed him money and had made no effort to repay it.
Then she left.
But the alleged inconsistent stories weren't all that detectives claimed had them troubled.
Get her stuck.
My partner and I both noticed that he was becoming increasingly more nervous. I found it unusual that he seemed to have so little concern over a woman that he lived with, that he loved.
I haven't seen her since, you know.
Just a very unusual interview, very little compassion shown on his part.
Well, if you can think of anything else that may help us out, we'd appreciate it if you'd give us a call.
Of course.
Despite the allegations of suspicious behavior and the inconsistent stories regarding John and his breakup with Colleen, there is no solid evidence to indicate he had anything to do with her disappearance. In fact, John Paul may have no knowledge whatsoever about the mystery surrounding Colleen Wood. He has not been named a suspect in the case.
We have no body, no physical evidence to show us what happened to Colleen, but I can tell you it's not good. I don't believe Colleen Wood is with us anymore.
I know she's gone. It's scary to know that something like this can happen to someone who's so close to you. You think it happens to everybody else, but you know what? I'm everybody else.
We need to find out what happened. We need to know if indeed he's responsible for the death of my mother. I really want to see justice served.
John Paul has apparently left town, violating the terms of his parole. Detectives would like to find him, to question him again about the disappearance of Colleen Wood.
Go do it.
According to her family, Jean Weaver's troubled marriage is nearing its end.
Let's be done with this joke of a relationship that we're saying is a marriage, that we're saying is a family.
They say that after 17 years together, she tells her husband Gordon she is seeking a divorce.
This is done. This is done.
Jean's family says they are concerned. They claim they have always considered Gordon strange, a reclusive loner who never attended any family functions. They are uncertain how he will react. 2 days after Jean's decision, her sister Kathy becomes worried. Jean, almost compulsively punctual, is 45 minutes late for a family gathering. Kathy and her husband Tom are driving to her home to discover why.
We get to the house and I'm panicking by then. I heard this beeping noise. I didn't know what it was. I was thinking, I don't understand this. And then it hit me. That was the fire alarm. It was smoke obscuring the windows. And I screamed at Tom. Tom, the house is full of smoke. Dial 911. Jean! Jean!
As firefighters race to the scene, Kathy and Tom try to determine if Jean is in the house. But the thick smoke is too stifling to penetrate. Three minutes later, the firefighters arrive. In the basement, they discover that the fire's intensity has caused water pipes to burst. They also discover Jean Weaver. A valiant effort is made to save her life.
And then the police chief comes over and said she's gone. And I just ran and I ran and I screamed and I screamed. I just can't begin to say how special Jean was.
Investigators in White Bear Lake, Minnesota determined that the fire causing the death of Jean Weaver was deliberately set. Burn patterns were consistent with a case of arson. An autopsy revealed that Jean had sustained a head injury but died from smoke inhalation. The police believed Jean had been murdered. They and Jean's family turned a suspicious eye on her husband, Gordon Weaver. Gordon Weaver had every advantage in life, yet seemed destined to struggle. He was a son of wealthy parents, but was plagued by financial problems. He had a high IQ, but experienced deep bouts of depression. As a golf and tennis club he owned was failing, he witnessed Jean build a successful career in the human resources industry. Her family wondered if his disintegrating relationship with Jean had led him to a desperate act.
We wanted so much to find out that it was just a horrible accident, that he had nothing to do with it. But the more time passed, I started to think that Cordy had actually killed Jean. It was unbelievable, but I believed it.
Jean's family claims that almost from the beginning, her marriage to Gordon was troubled. They say the joy Jean rarely experienced as a wife, she found as a mother. As the years passed, her love for her son grew, but her devotion to Gordon withered.
Could you just look at me while we talk about this?
What Jean would say about Gordy is that he would withdraw into himself. For many years, I just felt sorry for him because he seemed unhappy and just couldn't have a normal relationship with Jean. And she wasn't happy at all, but she thought it was the best for their son to remain together as a family.
A family crisis forced Jean to reevaluate her marriage. Her third sister, Patty, was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer.
Patty died, and that is what precipitated Jean into thinking life is too short to stay married.
I'm asking Gordon for a divorce.
According to Jean's sisters, Gordon reacted to her divorce plans by asking her an ominous question.
He said, "Have you told anyone this?" And Jeannie goes, "No." Well, we laughed because we said, as if you wouldn't tell your sisters that you were going to get a divorce. And now I think, why didn't that hit me? Why didn't I say, Jean, make sure you tell him that everyone knows you're going to get a divorce? But I can't explain why that didn't occur to me.
Just 3 days after Jean's alleged conversation with her sisters, she was found dead. That morning, her son was at a soccer game, and Gordon said he divided his time working at his office and running errands. Gordon returned home immediately after police contacted him by phone.
We were not able to give him a whole lot of information at that time, and he was asked to voluntarily come up to the police department to speak to one of our investigators, which was myself.
Was my wife in the house? Is she all right? Mr. Weaver, I'm afraid of some bad news. Was she hurt?
I'm afraid your wife passed away. I'm sorry.
Some of his mannerisms or behavior was not what one would expect, having come home and finding his house, surrounded by evidence tape, and then being told that his wife was, killed in the fire. And we began to suspect that he was possibly involved. and the death of Gene Weaver.
Detective Braun secured Gordon's permission to have forensics experts examine the clothes he was wearing that day. On them, they found traces of two flammable liquids that they also found on Gene's body. Investigators also learned that Gene's life insurance policies totaling more than $350,000 were due to lapse just 2 days after she was killed. The sole beneficiary was Gordon. Gene's sister, Kathy Reisgard, believes she knows what happened.
I believe Gordon went to confront Jane, and I believe he pushed her or shoved her. Ow! She had a wound to the head, and he panicked. And he set my sister on fire. My sister was alive when he set her on fire.
Because of the fire, some water pipes burst in the basement. The water pipes appeared to contain the fire to the laundry room area and also help preserve her body to the point that the medical examiner could do a complete autopsy and locate the head injury and some other physical evidence.
12 days after Jean's death, Gordon Weaver was arrested for her murder. He was soon released on bail. The FBI says a $300,000 cash bond was provided by his parents. 4 months later, while awaiting his indictment hearing, he borrowed his parents' car. They said he was going to Chicago for a vacation alone. Two days later, the car was found abandoned in Summit, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. Bloodstains found inside appear to indicate that Gordon Weaver had been the victim of a violent carjacking. Forensics experts determined the blood was human, but were unable to determine if it was Gordon's.
The timing of things is just all too coincidental for him to disappear or be carjacked. It's a week before that he is going to be indicted by a Ramsey County grand jury for first-degree murder. It doesn't make any kind of sense at all.
Did Gordon stage his disappearance, or did he indeed meet with foul play, as his parents say they firmly believe? 2 days after his car was found, an unexpected phone call apparently solved the mystery. It was received by a business associate of Gordon's.
This individual identified the person as Gordon Weaver. Gordon Weaver asked if they found his car. His co-worker spoke with him for just a very brief time, and then Gordon Weaver hung up. We do not believe in any way, shape, or form that Gordon Weaver is dead. His family has indicated that is what they believe, but the phone call makes it all crystal clear that Gordon Weaver did not die in that vehicle on that night. Gordon Weaver is still on the run.
Why should he be off somewhere? And Jean, the most beautiful person that you could imagine, is gone forever. If I knew then what I knew now, I would never have left Jean alone for a second.
A summer afternoon in Carson City, Nevada. Sandra Jennings receives an urgent call from her brother Clarence.
Hi, Clarence.
He's trying to locate his 16-year-old daughter, Natasha, who's visiting them from California.
Natasha?
I called home. My sister answered the phone. I asked her if Tosh was home. She set the phone down. She peeked out the back door. Didn't see her, so she went upstairs.
Oh my God! Natasha!
That's when I heard her screaming.
Clarence, I found Natasha. She's on the floor. She's not breathing.
I told her, well, hang up right now. Call 911. I'm on my way.
Okay.
Tragically, Natasha Jennings was already dead when the paramedics arrived. Ultimately, 3 theories on the cause of her death would emerge, involving accusations of drug abuse, sexual assault, and murder. Along the way, the reputations of Natasha and her family will be subjected to salacious rumor and innuendo. And to this day, how Natasha Jennings died remains a mystery. Natasha Jennings lived with her mother in Southern California. When she was very young, her parents divorced, a situation that affected Natasha deeply. In fact, Natasha had hoped her visit to Carson City would spark a stronger relationship with her father.
I told her no at first. I said, no, you're not going. But then I didn't want to put her in the middle of, our disagreements. What I feel towards her father is my own business. Doesn't involve her, that is her father.
Among her circle of friends, Natasha was a sensitive one.
As soon as she met someone, they were her friend. She always had something good to say. She was outgoing, the most caring person I've ever met. She just kept everyone that she knew close to her heart.
Sadly, Ingrid Kotar would now only have those cherished memories of her best friend to hold on to. Natasha's last day began uneventfully. She had lunch with her aunt at 1. Later that afternoon, Clarence Jennings placed several calls to his daughter. He had become increasingly worried when he was unable to reach her. When police arrived at the scene, they found Natasha as her aunt had found her, slumped across the bedroom floor. Her hair was damp as if she had just bathed. An electric fan inexplicably lay on top of her.
Anytime you have a young individual that's deceased for no specific apparent cause or reason, it's suspicious. It's treated as a homicide until such time as we can shift gears and say that it's something else.
Although there were no outward signs of trauma to Natasha's body, investigators quickly developed their first theory. Attention was directed at a young Carson City man Natasha had become close to, whom we will call Chris. Allegations had already been raised that Chris had sexually assaulted her just days before. The investigation revealed that Natasha and Chris had joined a group of friends at an impromptu party. The get-together dragged late into the night. Those who had been drinking were invited to wait until morning to drive home. No one saw what Natasha and Chris did the rest of the night. According to Ingrid Kotar, her friend in California, a confused and traumatized Natasha called the following morning to tell her something had happened after the party.
What's up? Natasha told me she had blacked out. She was drinking and she had blacked out, and that Chris had raped her.
Do you know where Natasha lives? I don't remember.
Chris was interrogated. However, detectives concluded that whatever may have happened between him and Natasha, his actions had not been criminal.
The autopsy report was conclusive that she was not sexually assaulted.
As soon as Natasha's mother learned of her death, she rushed to Carson City.
And I spoke with everybody that she was around. I went to places that she had been. I handed out flyers, thousands upon thousands upon thousands.
Tammy Stilton's efforts brought a new and unexpected theory to light.
I was in the shopping center passing out flyers when a woman approached me.
What is it?
And she was very scared.
Anything but you.
She was very skittish and watching over her shoulder, and she says, I know what happened to your daughter. She wrote her telephone number down. She goes, here. She goes, call me.
The woman claimed that Natasha's father, Clarence, was a drug informant for local law enforcement authorities. She said drug dealers had found out and killed Natasha in retaliation.
My ex-wife had asked me, is there any possibility that they might have had something to do with it in retaliation for my being an informant for the police department. And my jaw dropped. I've never been an informant for the police department.
Led by Natasha's mother, a group of relatives confronted one of the Carson City detectives assigned to Natasha's case.
And we asked him if he was aware that Clarence was, or Natasha's father was an informant, and he didn't deny it at all. He said yes, he was aware of it.
I can say, based upon our records and the records of the Nevada Division of Investigations, which would be more typified as state narcotics, Clarence Jennings was not, nor was he ever a documented informant for either agency.
How long have you known Natasha Jennings?
But soon yet another theory, the third, would redirect the course of the investigation. Authorities still believed a drug connection could have played a vital role in Natasha's death, but with a stunning new twist.
Have you ever seen Natasha use any kind of drugs?
No, Tosh would never use drugs.
Investigators were now speculating that Natasha had brought about her own death by overdosing on drugs. They focused on two pieces of evidence. A scrap of plastic recovered on a landing outside Natasha's bedroom contained traces of methamphetamine, commonly known as speed, and cocaine. And an examination of Natasha's body had revealed a minute amount of the drugs in her nostrils.
The cocaine and methamphetamine can lead to increased body temperature, hyperthermia. I think she probably took a bath to cool down, and she was then in the process of drying her hair when she collapsed, most likely a spasm.
They said she was on a 5-day drugging, drinking, sex party. And I was like, no, I know my daughter. She wouldn't have used.
The official investigation report states that the medical examiner found no drug residue in Natasha's system during autopsy.
If you snort cocaine on Monday and you're deceased on Friday, and we do a toxicology, we may find remnants of the drug, perhaps in your nose or maybe in an injection point or something like that. But the actual toxicology of your blood and urine and whatnot may produce a zero amount.
Today, the investigation has hit a dead end. For Tammy Stelton, all the theories and endless speculation have only produced frustration and more questions.
All I wanted was answers. For somebody to talk to me, explain to me what's been going on with her. But nobody will. Nobody has.
The unfortunate part is I don't have an answer for the mother. This girl was 16 years old. She had her entire life ahead of her, and we don't have any answers. We don't have the bottom line.
I didn't want her to go.
And I was kind of mad at myself because I had felt it and didn't take heed to those emotions. I had actually sent her a note telling her that I wanted her to come home. She didn't make it back.
Officially, the investigation into the 1997 death of Natasha Jennings is still open. At a motel room in Elgin, Illinois, Michael Alfonso has reached a breaking point. Desperately willing to go to any lengths to save a relationship. His girlfriend, single mother Josefina Gonzalez, has agreed to meet with him to listen to his final plea. But Michael refuses to accept her decision.
No, 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 no!
After Alfonso stabs her, he tries to escape with Josefina's 2-year-old child. Although severely wounded, Josefina fights back. She saves her son by plunging Michael Alfonso's own knife into his back. He drops the child and bleeding flees into the night. Josefina Gonzalez and her son recovered from the 1994 attack. Michael Alfonso was arrested when he sought treatment for his wounds. Alfonso would be convicted of aggravated battery and serve 4 years in prison. Tragically, Josefina Gonzalez would not be the last of Alfonso's relationships to allegedly end in violence. In June 2001, Hannah Velasquez, separated from her husband, was working 2 jobs to support her young daughter. Unfortunately for Hannah, Michael Alfonso also worked at one of those companies, and he had Hannah in his sights.
You scared me.
I snuck away before anybody saw me.
Oh,
I've got like 5 minutes now. I came in here just to ask you out to dinner.
tonight?
Yeah, tonight.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I get off around 8, so if you want to come back around 8.
Hannah's relationship with Michael Alfonso continued to grow as her own marital relationship deteriorated.
She didn't talk about any relationship with him, but she always said, I'm alive right now, I gotta do what I can right now. And she also wanted a good future for her and for her daughter.
Hannah's second job was at a local fast food restaurant. She had shared with a co-worker the difficulties she was having with her estranged husband.
Hannah was having marriage problems. I said, you just got to communicate with each other and everything will be okay. And then about a few days later, Hannah starts getting these phone calls at work.
Hannah, for you. Hello? Yeah, we're busy right now.
And this man starts calling like every other day there. Then I asked her, I says, who is this man calling you at work? And she would not answer me.
No,
She would not tell me.
yeah, we're just friends. Everything's fine.
She said, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. I said, okay, then, fine.
But Renee Anderson's concern for her young friend would prove prophetic. When Hannah Velasquez made a decision to reconcile with her husband, she would see Michael Alfonso's darker side.
My husband and I are getting back together. Me
Wait,
and my husband. We are.
What does that mean? That means you're leaving me? No, you're not going to leave me.
Michael Alfonso is an aggressive, violent man. When he doesn't get his way, he gets angry. Many of his friends tell us that they're scared of him, that they don't know which way he's going to turn because he's so unpredictable.
Hey, I'm talking to you. Did you hear me? Hey, you're listening to me. Okay, there's nothing. You're not going anywhere. You don't break up with me, or I hurt you and your family.
Hannah was so frightened by Alfonso's threats that she notified authorities.
Hi, this is Hannah Velasquez. This guy was seen as threatening me.
She did not want to pursue any criminal charges at the time because she was deathly afraid of retaliation by Michael Alfonso.
No, you can't talk to him. Then I know he's going to do something.
A pretty clear pattern of Michael Alfonso's behavior has emerged here. It seems as though when he begins to date a woman and the relationship goes sour, he gets angry at the woman and does not want them to leave. And what he does is he reacts with violence.
The day after Hannah's altercation with Michael Alfonso, Alfonso reportedly confronted her at the restaurant where she worked.
I told you it's over between us.
According to what one customer told me, some man comes up to her and they start arguing. And it was a very heated argument from what the customer told me.
Hannah's husband, who also worked at the same restaurant, was taking a rest break in his car on the other side of the building and had no idea his wife was in danger.
Don't run away from me. I told you, don't turn your back on me. You're not leaving me. You repent this?
One of the witnesses was in an automobile waiting in the drive-through line for food. Michael walked directly at her vehicle and walked between her car and the drive-through, and she looked at his face and noticed that he had a smirk on his face.
Another witness reported the hooded assailant ran toward a dark-colored car.
There was a person that noticed a black Firebird type of a vehicle drive away at a high rate of speed. we know from records that Michael Alfonso owns a 1994 black-colored Pontiac Firebird.
I'm holding Hannah and I said to her, hold on, Hannah, hold on. Everything's going to be okay.
Surrounded by her friends and co-workers, 28-year-old Hannah Velasquez struggled for life. Hannah would not win that fight. She was pronounced dead shortly after being taken to a hospital. When an all-points bulletin went out for the capture of Michael Alfonso, police learned they were in search of a career criminal. Before Alfonso served a 4-year prison term for the attack on Josefina Gonzalez, he had served time for a 1989 rape. Even then, investigators knew Alfonso was a threat to society, but were disappointed by the leniency of the court.
We asked for a lengthier prison sentence. The judge disagreed with us and didn't feel that Alfonso posed a threat to the community. Of course, history has proved differently. He is a tremendous threat to any woman who he becomes involved with.
Authorities were also suspicious of Alfonso's involvement in the unsolved 1992 disappearance of a young woman he was dating. Sumanir Yang reportedly informed Alfonso she intended to break up with him and return to her husband, and was never seen alive again.
Any woman that he gets involved in a relationship with is in grave danger unless they accede to all his demands and remain his loyal servant. They are in danger of being raped or killed.
2 months after her disappearance, the body of Sumanir Yang was discovered in a remote area. She had been shot in the head. But despite the suspicions of law enforcement, Michael Alfonso was currently wanted only for the murder of Hannah Velasquez. And for the friends and family of Hannah, the grieving has just begun.
I can't accept that she's dead. I'm hoping one day she'll come back to me. This is a joke. It was a lie.
This guy doesn't deserve to be helped, or he doesn't deserve anything. I mean, he doesn't even deserve to live because he's taking, other human beings' life. So if anyone is helping him, he doesn't deserve no help. He deserves to be behind bars.
Every mystery has a potential to be solved. It may take months, it may take years, or it may occur during our next edition of Unsolved Mysteries.
Tonight on Unsolved Mysteries.
It was unthinkable. Just days after the cold-blooded attacks of 9/11, America faced another ominous threat, bioterrorism. The instrument of death this time, anthrax, the toxic bacteria that can kill in a matter of days, and did 5 times. The killer is still on the loose. The FBI needs your help to solve this baffling case. A Texas teenager is kidnapped. His father has 7 hours to collect the ransom and deliver it to his abductors. The fate of young Kyle McElroy hangs in the balance. For more than 20 years, Monica LeBeau has been searching for her birth parents. Her investigation has brought her to a painful conclusion. At a very young age, she may have been kidnapped. Perhaps you can help Monica learn the truth. At Texas A&M University, a suspected serial rapist is caught when his first victim has a second startling face-to-face encounter with him. After being released on bail, Don Richard Davis Jr. dropped out of sight. We'll bring you an update on his surprising arrest and trial. A woman whose family was ripped apart by murder searches for her long-lost siblings. Thanks to our audience, she is finally reunited with a relative she believed she would never see again. Join me for these intriguing stories and more. Perhaps you may be the one chosen by fate to solve a mystery. Tuesday, October 16th, 2001. Norma Wallace reported for work at the postal office in Trenton, New Jersey.
Hey,
She wasn't feeling well and thought it was a mild case of the flu. But as the day wore on, Norma became increasingly ill. She could barely breathe. Some 200 miles away in Washington, D.C., another postal worker, Leroy Richmond, was suffering nearly identical symptoms. He too became gravely ill. In a matter of days, both Norma and Leroy were hospitalized, their conditions growing worse by the hour. They seemed to be slowly suffocating to death. Doctors couldn't figure out why. But after administering a battery of tests, they finally came up with a diagnosis: anthrax. What these veteran postal workers were told by doctors was terrifying. Like millions of other Americans, Leroy Richmond and Norma Wallace were aware of an anthrax-related death in Florida just days earlier. Now they were suffering from the most virulent form of the disease, fatal 95% of the time. Suddenly, in the wake of September 11th, the nation faced a second wave of terrorism. Who would commit such heinous crimes, and why? Someone somewhere in the world had access to the deadly substance anthrax, the knowledge to work with it, and an environment appropriate for its handling. Was it an individual or the work of a group? Where were they located, and what were their motives? These questions plagued investigators and continue to do so today. For a nation still reeling from the 9/11 terrorist attacks, it seemed nearly impossible to fathom. The anthrax time bomb started ticking 11 days before striking Norma and Leroy on October 5th, 2001. 63-year-old Robert Stevens, a photo editor at the Sun newspaper, died in Boca Raton, Florida. The cause? Exposure to anthrax spores, which experts believe came from an open letter. But the letter had been thrown away, its origin unknown. Suddenly, federal investigators were thrust into the world of bioterrorism. They were baffled.
We don't have a crime scene in the traditional sense. We don't have witnesses, and we really don't have anyone that we can call an informant at this point.
The same week, more media targets. NBC News and the New York Post in Manhattan.
It is clear that the terrorists responsible for these attacks intended to use this anthrax as a weapon.
But this time a clue. Postmarks on the envelopes. Trenton, New Jersey. A swarm of FBI agents checked every mailbox in town for traces of anthrax. They found none. Only more questions. Why Trenton? Was the anthrax package there? Did the terrorists live in the area? Or were the letters mailed from the city only as a ruse? Whoever had the diabolical will and ability to put anthrax in the mail could easily have the intelligence to plot unimaginable false trails. October 9th, 2001. Two more anthrax-laced letters, again postmarked Trenton. This time, politicians the targets. Senators Tom Daschle and Patrick Leahy at their offices in D.C. A form of anthrax so pure and concentrated it was termed weapons grade.
It was dangerous stuff. It was estimated that 2 trillion spores went into each of those envelopes, which would have been 2 grams. One envelope may have had 100 million lethal doses.
Unthinkable. Under the right conditions, just 2 grams of anthrax could potentially wipe out 1/3 of the U.S. population. Investigators came to a significant conclusion. Notes contained within the anthrax-laden envelopes were so similar in handwriting they had to come from the same source. But the content of the notes could be viewed as a clue or another ruse. It references to 9/11, death to Israel, and Allah is great point to Arab terrorists, or to someone who wanted investigators to think Arab extremists were involved.
We are looking at 3 broad areas. The first being international terrorists, domestic terrorism. We're looking at some of the individuals within the United States, and then we're looking at the lone wolf as well.
October 20th, 2001. Hundreds of federal investigators worked night and day to solve a crime like none they had ever encountered. Meanwhile, postal worker Norma Wallace fought for her life. Her temperature soared above 100. She was in shock. The anthrax spores were secreting a lethal exotoxin, causing blood vessels to break and the bacteria to pulse through her bloodstream.
I felt like I was dying. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Once the spores enter your lungs, they actually attack the tissues and the lymph nodes and causes the anthrax to actually take possession of your body.
Yeah, well, you gotta read this. Norma knew her condition was serious, but the news of just how serious was alarming. I'm just reading about the survival rate.
When my brother brought me the information back, it said that inhalation anthrax was the deadliest form of anthrax. 95% of the people die. So I said, I'm ready. Whatever God decides for me, I'm ready for it.
The prognosis for Leroy Richmond was also grim. Suffering excruciating pain, Leroy laid helpless as his lungs filled with fluids. Worse, doctors knew the most powerful drugs were rarely effective in fighting this silent killer.
I think I was about as near death then as I ever was going to get. My breathing had become so shallow that I was actually panting like a dog would breathe. And I heard a couple of guys say, man, he's not going to last but a couple hours, and that'll be it for him.
But how had 2 mail sorters at 2 different post offices become infected in the first place? High-tech mail sorting equipment. Investigators concluded that the sheer speed of 30,000 envelopes per hour flying through a sorter could send millions of anthrax spores into the air. Routine machine maintenance using air blowers only made the possibilities worse.
I looked up and saw this dust and this soot and stuff coming out of the machine. And I just looked up and said, oh my God. And I said like that, and probably in that instance, I may have inhaled the spores.
Miraculously, Norma and Leroy survived their harrowing ordeals. However, their lives will never be the same.
I can't do all the things I would normally do. And the diagnosis from the doctors is, hey, look, Mr. Richmond, the toxins will be in your system for at least 1.5 years to 2 years.
The hardest part is not knowing what's going to happen next year or 10 years from now. You know, whether my memory is going to come back or whether I'm just going to, fade into oblivion.
Despite their uncertainty, Norma Wallace and Leroy Richmond at least have a future. 4 other anthrax victims weren't so lucky, bringing the death toll to 5. October 21st and 22nd, 2001, Washington, D.C. Leroy's co-workers Thomas Morris and Joseph Cursine. October 31st, New York City. Hospital worker Kathy Newen. 3 weeks later, Ottilie Lundgren in Derby, Connecticut. The deaths of Kathy and Ottilie were especially puzzling. Authorities concluded they had somehow come in contact with anthrax-tainted mail that may have been contaminated in the sorting process, but no one could say for certain.
It was said that the lethal dose for human was 8,000 to 10,000 spores. It would suggest, by the deaths of the lady in Connecticut and New York City, that probably many fewer spores led to their death.
November 30th, 2001. A breakthrough. Experts determined the anthrax spores in each of the letters came from the same strain of the bacterium. The so-called AIM strain was confined to only 6 research labs in the U.S. That led FBI profilers to conclude the anthrax attacks were probably not the work of international terrorists, but rather someone right here at home. Someone who may have had access to one of these facilities.
Loading these letters with anthrax required specific expertise. In other words, it couldn't be done in your basement or your garage unless you had some specific equipment.
May 2002, still no prime suspect. However, scientific analysis of the genetic fingerprints of the anthrax spores revealed they may have come from one of 2 research sites, both under the control of the U.S. Army. The Medical Research Institute at Fort Detrick, Maryland, and the Dugway Proving Ground in Utah. Today, federal investigators are in the midst of a controversial program to administer voluntary polygraph tests to large numbers of employees at these 2 sites. The goal? To smoke out individuals who might have information about the anthrax attacks. Meanwhile, with no assurance the elusive killer has ties to any of these facilities, the manhunt continues at home and abroad.
That person has to be a serious coward and unable to deal with reality to have done something like that. And it's not just that it could have happened here, but it could have happened anywhere.
We are in the middle of an exhaustive national, international investigation. We've interviewed over 5,000 people already. We've issued well in excess of 1,300 subpoenas. And every little piece of the puzzle helps.
Day shift is over. Time for the real workers.
18-year-old Kyle McElroy is among the most promising young citizens of the small town of Troop, Texas. He works for his father, Kevin, who owns a plastics factory. At the end of each day, Kevin turns the reins of the business over to Kyle. Despite his youth, he has proven himself to be an adept supervisor of the night shift.
He's gonna give me 12 cotter pins, hold me in place until morning.
Together, father and son have made the McElroy Plastics Company a booming success. Friday, March 10th, 9:20 a.m.
McElroy Plastics? Who is this? Sarah who?
Marty came in and told me that, asked me if I knew of Sarah. And I said, well, what company did she work for? She said she wouldn't tell me nothing.
This is McElroy. How can I help you?
Kevin, we have your son. Take the 110 south, you'll find his truck there. Look in the truck for further instructions. Do not call the police. We are watching you.
I'm not really in the mood for this right now. I'm thinking, it's maybe a joke.
That's not fun.
And I'm really not believing what I'm hearing. Put him on the phone. So she put Kyle on the phone just for maybe 5 seconds or so.
Do what they said. They mean it, or they're gonna kill me.
The last time Kyle had been seen was at the end of his work shift the previous night. Kevin was now certain the mysterious Sarah was dead serious. Kevin McElroy had only moments to decide what course of action to take. Despite the kidnapper's warning, he contacted the Troop, Texas Police Department. The officers were determined to keep their involvement a secret from Kyle's abductors. Following Sarah's orders, Kevin set out to retrieve the written instruction from Kyle's abandoned truck. As a precaution, Kevin allowed a Troop, Texas police officer to follow him discreetly. The officer, posing as a rancher, would stop further along the road and observe Kevin from a distance. Both men knew they had to expect the unexpected. The truck was locked, and Kevin had no keys.
The first thing I was thinking is, are we dealing with a bunch of terrorists? Or what if, while I'm trying to get in the pickup, it blows up?
The ransom note was just where Sarah said it would be.
The letter said that they were asking for $200,000 in $100 bills, and that I had 7 hours to come up with the money and then go back to my office, and that's when they would call me and tell me where to drop that off at.
With 6.5 hours remaining until the kidnapper's deadline, Kevin arrived at a prearranged staging area to meet with the authorities. The FBI was now in charge of the case.
Jared, down.
They want $2,000.
There was nothing in that note to tell us where Cal was, where to deliver the money, or what means Cal will be released. So we knew the abductors had to contact Mr. McElroy again.
Ride with him.
So I sent 2 agents with him.
For their plan to work, FBI agents had to be present at Kevin's factory when the kidnappers phoned again. But they had to do so under conditions of absolute secrecy. All of Kevin's employees were sent home under the pretense of a major mechanical breakdown at the plant. 4 p.m. The way was now clear for the FBI to move in. By this time, Kevin had collected only half of the demanded $200,000.
Gary to Gary. We're inside.
The next move belonged to the kidnappers. 6:30 p.m.
Have the money.
I got most of it.
What do you mean most of the money?
I can't get the whole 200. It's Friday. The banks don't have it.
The FBI worked furiously to trace the call.
You don't have any more.
The FBI had asked me to stall her. I said, "You're going to get your money." I said, "But I want to talk to Kyle and I want to make sure he's all right." She said, "He's fine." She said, "You're not going to get to talk to him."
Listen to me. Pay attention. Take the money you have.
Sarah instructed Kevin to drive to a payphone outside a local restaurant. There he would find a note directing him what to do next.
Go alone and
The call was traced to a rural phone booth, but by the time the FBI got there, Sarah had vanished. The only course of action now was to follow her orders and take every precaution possible. "7:15 p.m.
I didn't see a note or I was kind of expecting a little brown envelope like the ransom note come in. And so I put picking through all that trash. I thought, well, maybe there's something in this trash, maybe on a candy wrapper. So, I went through it, and in the very bottom of that pile was a note.
The note ordered Kevin to deliver the ransom money to a laundromat a half a mile away. He would then receive another call at his office, informing him where he could find Kyle. The FBI rapidly deployed a SWAT team near the back of the laundromat.
Got 360-degree view. There's no movement at this time.
When Kevin drove up to the laundromat to drop off the ransom money, there was a lot of tension. Anytime someone's life is on the line, there's a lot of tension. You want to get this done and find the victim as soon as possible.
One hour passed.
Two suspects approaching from the north. Beanie caps, blue sweatshirts, blue jeans. They're looking around. Going for the money. Got the money. They go. FBI, freeze! Go, 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 go!
One of the men arrested was an employee of the McElroy Plastics Company, a friend of Kyle's, Victor Ferreras. The FBI learned his real name was Daniel Rios. Two alleged accomplices were also arrested, but the woman who called herself Sarah was nowhere to be found. The following day, the suspects told the FBI Kyle could be found on an abandoned farm outside of town. Kevin waited anxiously as agents went in search of his son.
It was late in the evening. They asked me if they could speak to me. They had some information for me. And I could tell by the looks on their face that it wasn't good. And they said that he was dead. They found him dead. It's like somebody walking up and hitting you, but you can't feel it. You think about it and it just makes you mad.
The medical examiner determined Kyle had been choked to death before the first ransom call was ever made. The FBI believes his abductors made a recording of Kyle, then killed him. Sarah then played the tape for Kevin over the phone. They say they learned that Sarah was in fact Desiree Dawn Lingo Perkins. The FBI believes she was a prostitute known to frequent migrant worker camps in the area. She is now wanted for murder. She is 5'6", and her weight fluctuates between 170 and 200 pounds. 1970. In a small Texas town, a fragile child clutched her only friend and waited patiently. Her family was on the move again, a routine that had become all too familiar. It was the 8th move to 5 different states in Monica LeBeau's young life. Eventually, she would move a total of 28 times in 15 years.
I would come home from school, and there would be boxes everywhere, and I knew it was time to go again.
Monica's parents, Pablo and Burma LeBeau, were older. Her 2 half-sisters grown and never around. However, the lonely little girl didn't question her family's nomadic lifestyle, or why she was always kept home from school on class picture days. Monica simply learned to fend for herself, but it wasn't easy.
I would get kind of angry because by the time I made friends, we were up and gone again. So that was kind of hard.
Then at age 16, when most teens were thinking about boys in the latest fashion rage, Monica's life was turned upside down.
My mother got ill, and I had to transfer my mother's medical papers to where she was in the hospital. And I was reading through my mom's folder, and I read some words that just probably changed my life forever. And that's when I found out that my mother had a total hysterectomy in 1945. There's no way I could have belonged to her.
Imagine finding out your mother had a hysterectomy nearly 2 decades before you were born. She couldn't possibly have been your mother, and for 16 years you'd been lied to. If Burma LeBeau wasn't Monica's mother, then who was? The search for that answer has consumed Monica's life, leading her into an incredibly tangled web of lies, half-truths, and innuendos. What makes this story even more disturbing, however, is where it all may lead to an unthinkable crime.
Don't be concerned with this. It's not.
I asked my mother, I said, if you're not my mother, I want to know who is my mother.
Because this is my life. It has no bearing on
And
your life whatsoever. We are your parents.
she got mad,
Yes, it does.
but she told me that my mother was a family member. My sister.
You had a child. She couldn't take care of you. Why didn't you tell me?
I was shocked. And that was probably the worst shock in my life.
She said it was you. Is that true?
It was true that Monica's half-sister was much older, 19 years in fact. But could she really be her mother?
I asked her straight out if she was my mother. And she said, no, I'm not your mother.
You don't believe her. I am not.
She said, well, Mom just doesn't want to face the truth. And I said, well, what is the truth?
Who is?
And my sister told me that my real mother sold me for a bus ticket to New York. And that she was trash and no good, and I didn't need to know her anyway.
She gave you to your mom.
Had Monica really been sold for the price of a bus ticket? Or was this simply another bizarre story about her birth mother? Monica didn't know who to trust or who to believe. Again, she haunted her parents to tell her the truth.
The more I asked, the more they wouldn't tell me anything. And I started wondering at that point, maybe something bad happened.
Monica was not convinced her parents had something to hide. She began snooping around the house in search of any link to her past, and soon ran across a sturdy metal box. Inside was the very document Monica had hoped to find, her birth certificate. But the details seemed sketchy. There was no hospital listed, no address, no doctor. And the document had not been filed until the early 1970s, when Monica was 7 years old. She had only one place to turn for help, one of her half-sisters.
She said, your mom and dad paid a lawyer $2,000 to make this false birth certificate.
Was Monica's whole life a fraud? It now made sense why, growing up, she never had her own social security number, but used her father's instead. Chicago was listed as Monica's place of birth, and in 1990, at age 26, she contacted Illinois Judge Gene Scott in hopes of finding an adoption record. Judge Scott answered her in a letter.
Well, she told me that she could not find anything from the years 62, 63, 64, that she had searched all the records that they had there.
Chicago had turned into another dead end. Sadly, it all seemed like a bad soap opera, with Monica thrust into the lead role. For the next decade, Monica was haunted by the strange and conflicting stories surrounding her past. Still, she managed to get on with her life, marry, and have a daughter of her own.
Mom, I need to know who I am. And I think it's important for my daughter to know that too.
During a rare family get-together, Monica decided to try one last time to find out the truth.
I'm your mother.
My mom, at that point, was just angry, very angry. She started getting mad, and my sister, they just kind of looked at each other.
Mother,
According to Monica, her half-sister suddenly became irate.
I never gave birth to this child.
She began ranting about how nearly 4 decades earlier her mother had hidden a tiny baby from the police.
Mother, I had to tell lies to the police, and I did that for you and Dad.
Lying now.
They were looking for me.
Monica was stunned. In an instant, the past came flooding back. She remembered as a teenager overhearing her father talk about stashing a cardboard box in a bar, something about roadblocks, and the need to tell the truth. A picture began to emerge that was both ugly and sinister.
Police were looking for
The indication that I got from the whole thing is that my mother had probably kidnapped me. I really started thinking, my God, have they just up and take me, from somebody?
To this day, that question and others remain unanswered. Was Monica abducted as an infant? An appalling crime that forced Pablo and Burma LeBeau to stay one step ahead of the law? Was a tiny baby sold by a desperate young girl for the price of a bus ticket? Or is Monica's half-sister not her sister at all, but her mother?
I would be willing to go through anything, a DNA test, anything at all, to be able to find out the truth behind all this.
If Monica's half-sister agreed to be tested, it would answer at least one of these puzzling questions. However, according to relatives, she recently left her husband of 25 years and simply disappeared. On another sad note, Monica's own husband passed away in 1998. He was only 31 years old. That tragic loss has only deepened Monica's resolve to find her birth mother.
I am without an identity, and I'm searching, and I'm probably going to keep searching. I'm not going to give up.
Monica was born with only half an earlobe on her left ear, a clue that may help unravel this mystery. And if Monica was indeed kidnapped, she believes it happened in the Miami, Florida area in 1963 or 1964. Previously, we brought you the story of the fear that gripped Texas A&M University when police thought that a serial rapist was on the loose. Now that a suspect is behind bars, the residents of a small college town can finally feel more secure. The rapist hid his intentions behind a show of normalcy. He looked like just another student out for an evening jog. But as he turned to go back toward his intended victim, his casual demeanor turned violent.
The suspect kept that knife
within her sight. And she had every indication at that point that he would use that knife on her.
30 minutes later, the rapist disappeared into the shadows. University police released a composite sketch and character profile of the suspect. Several months later, a knife-wielding assailant attacked another Texas A&M student.
From nowhere, she said, a knife appeared and was placed against her throat. He threatened her. He told her that if she screamed, he was going to kill her, and then took her to the location that he had already prepared.
This composite was based on the second victim's description. A comparison with the first drawing bolstered investigators' suspicions that a serial rapist was stalking the campus. Authorities papered the campus community with posters, but the rapes went unsolved for 10 months. The critical break in the case came from the first victim herself, when she happened to stop for groceries at a local market.
Howdy, how you doing? Hey. This is a knife.
The young woman was convinced that she was face to face with the man who raped her.
Excuse me? You forgot something.
Police would soon learn that the clerk was named Don Richard Davis Jr. He was scheduled to graduate from Texas A&M in 3 weeks. When this photograph of Davis was shown to the second victim, she too identified him as the rapist. DNA tests confirmed the identification with 90% certainty. Don Richard Davis Jr. was charged with aggravated sexual assault and released on bail. 6 days later, Davis disappeared. For the next 5 years, police had a fugitive case on their hands. In October of 2000, a routine traffic violation in Cleveland would be the beginning of the end for Davis.
Don Davis got stopped on a traffic stop one day, and when they rolled his fingerprints at that point in time, that's when it connected up as a hit with Don Davis, and then that information just kind of mushroomed from there.
Davis was brought back to Texas to stand trial in the rapes of the 2 women. But before his trial began, he pled guilty to the charges. A jury heard testimony to determine his sentence. Don Richard Davis will serve 99 years in prison, pending his appeal.
With the conviction of Mr. Davis, justice has been served, and I know for a fact that the 2 victims that we had are extremely relieved. They feel better, and I think they're probably sleeping a lot better now, because Mr. Davis will no longer be out on the streets.
On a previous broadcast, we brought you the story of Laurie Delorme Magnin. At the age of 3, Laurie was adopted under mysterious circumstances by a family in Kansas City, Missouri. The reason for her adoption was kept secret by all parties involved. Laurie had no idea what happened to her birth parents or her brother and 3 sisters. As she grew older, Laurie searched for her family, but only discovered that her mother, Frances Camarena, died on November 27, 1956. Along with her husband and son, Laurie decided to look at the Kansas City Star on the day of her mother's death. Staring back at her from the front page was a 14-month-old Laurie surrounded by her 4 siblings.
That's when I first time saw a picture of me and my brother and my sisters. First time.
The accompanying article finally revealed a dark, violent secret in Laurie's past. In the pre-dawn hours of November 26, 1956, Laurie's father, Alexander Camarena, murdered Laurie's mother. Laurie learned that her father was convicted of second-degree murder and died in 1991. But her efforts to find her older sisters, Phyllis, Rosemary, and Nancy, and her younger brother, Robert, have failed.
My real brother and sisters. We lost both our parents now.
Yeah, Mommy.
And I think they need me like I need them.
Shortly after our broadcast, Ruth Crook, Lori's birth cousin, contacted our telecenter. A friend of Ruth's had seen the show and told her that her long-lost cousin was looking for her birth family.
It was a happy shock and very exciting to know that she had been found, because everyone always wondered what happened to those children.
My dream's coming true.
3 weeks later, Lori found herself at her adopted sister's house outside of Kansas City, eagerly awaiting the arrival of the relatives she has spent her entire life searching for.
Hi, how are you? It's for you.
First out of the car was Lori's older sister, Rosemary.
I was just looking at her. I just couldn't believe it. And we were both crying, and it just felt good to hold her. And we just held each other. I'm so happy you're here.
And I was just shaking when I got out of the car. You know, just nervous and happy, very joyful.
Soon Lori was surrounded by aunts, uncles, and cousins she never even knew she had. As her birth family and adopted family became acquainted, Lori's circle of loved ones grew larger than she could have ever imagined.
My sister Carol, our brother Doral. This is Rosemary. Yeah, I feel surrounded by love. I feel really great. I have all these pictures of me when I was a baby I haven't ever seen.
And for the first time, Lori got to see a picture of her mother.
Beautiful.
The eldest sister, Phyllis, was unable to attend the reunion, but she and Lori met each other shortly after the rest of the family reunited. Sadly, Lori's younger brother, Robert, seen as an infant in the news photo, died in 1982. And after our original broadcast, Lori finally located the last sibling, Nancy. Nancy and Lori have spoken on numerous occasions and hope to have another family reunion in the near future.
Dear God, thank you for bringing together this wonderful family of families. We especially thank you.
Now that we're all back together, that we have each other now, we'll write each other, call each other, visit each other. Nothing will keep us apart. Everybody's just all excited. It's all excitement. It's all good.
For every mystery, there is someone who knows the truth. Perhaps it's you.
This program is about unsolved mysteries. Whenever possible, the actual family members and police officials have participated in recreating the events. What you are about to see is not a news broadcast.
Tonight, on a special 2-hour edition of Unsolved Mysteries, the strange and mysterious saga of the Circleville Letters. For 18 years, residents of a small town in Ohio have been deluged with anonymous death threats, slanderous accusations, and even a lethal booby trap. Many believe this vicious campaign has led to the death of one man and the unjust imprisonment of another. From England, the spellbinding case is not only in the grand tradition of Agatha Christie, it's about Agatha herself. In 1926, as her marriage was unraveling, a best-selling mystery writer of all time vanished without a trace, leaving the authorities to figure out who done it and why. In December of 1991, 21-year-old Tommy Burkett was found shot to death in his bedroom. Just minutes after arriving at the scene, investigators told Tommy's parents that their son had committed suicide. But now Tommy's mother and father believe they have unearthed a chilling scenario of murder, which may implicate the local police. Legend has it that beneath the remote, chilly waters of Lake Michigan lies a sunken fortune. 5 chests stuffed with gold and bullion worth millions. Tonight we'll join a dangerous underwater quest to find the Poverty Island treasure. Also tonight we'll take you to the phone center for a very special milestone, the solving of our 200th mystery, and a very special update, the reunion of a GI and the buddy who saved his life in Vietnam. Join me for 2 hours of intriguing cases, a celebration of 200 solved and unsolved mysteries. In December of 1993, Unsolved Mysteries received this postcard. It is not exactly in the vein of our usual viewer mail. The card read, "Forget Circleville, Ohio. Do nothing to hurt Sheriff Radcliffe. If you come to Ohio, you El Sickos will pay. The Circleville Writer." It's not often that we become part of a story we're investigating. But in this case, it didn't come as a total surprise. For the past 18 years, residents in and around Circleville, Ohio, have received literally thousands of bizarre letters and postcards. They represent an insidious campaign of character assassination, which some believe has left one man dead and another unfairly imprisoned. Circleville, Ohio, 30 miles south of Columbus, is a place that rarely attracts outside attention. In fact, the town's main claim to fame is its annual pumpkin show. For years, Circleville was a stable workaday community. Then in 1976, the letters started.
One of the very first letters, if not the first letter, was received by Mary Gillespie, a school bus driver, telling her that the letter writer was aware that she was having an affair with the superintendent of schools and that it had better stop.
In addition to allegations of an affair, the letter carried an ominous threat.
"I know where you live. I've been observing your house and know you have children. This is no joke. Please take it serious."
The envelope was postmarked Columbus, Ohio. There was no return address outside, no signature inside, no way to tell whether it came from a man or a woman. Within 8 days, Mary Gillespie had received another letter similar in tone.
Mary?
Mary apparently kept the letters to herself until her husband, Ron, received one as well.
What's going on?
All right, I already got 2 of these, okay? And I didn't say anything because it's not true.
What do
You
you
have
mean
to
you
know
got
it's
2 of
not
these?
true.
Why didn't you say something?
Because I thought they would just go away.
And this letter, addressed to Ron Gillespie, told him that if he didn't do something to stop this affair, that his life was undoubtedly in danger.
The alleged affair was a rumor tailor-made to set any small town on its ear. The superintendent of schools and a school bus driver. Soon the anonymous writer was threatening to go public.
Gillespie, you have had 2 weeks and done nothing. Make her admit the truth and inform the school board. If not, I will broadcast it on CBs, posters, signs, and billboards until the truth comes out.
Mary and Ron evidently confided in 3 family members: Ron's sister, her husband Paul Freshour, and Paul's sister.
What was that movie? It was in black and white, where they wrote letters. They thought they knew who the suspects were, so they wrote letters to them.
I know who you are.
Mary had some ideas about who was sending the letters, and she had a plan.
Tell them we know who they are.
All you have to do is decrypt. What do we say?
Just like the letters. We know who you are.
We thought we'd, scare the guy. We did 4 or 5 letters only, nothing, there was no violence in him or anything, just that we knew who he was and what he was doing, and we sent him the letters. For a while, the plan worked. The threatening letters stopped. Then, on August 19th, 1977, Ron Gillespie got a phone call.
Who is this? No, you listen to me. We're sick of this, okay? No more letters, no more phone calls. We're sick of the whole thing. Just end it, all right?
No one knows what the caller actually said, but the call apparently confirmed Ron's suspicions about the identity of the letter writer.
He told the children he was going out. He was going to confront the letter writer. He took his weapon. He did not seem to be drunk. Said goodbye to his children and went out.
In the heat of the moment, Ron Gillespie ran to the family's red and white pickup, even though the letter writer had often referred to the fact that he or she was watching that truck. Perhaps Ron didn't remember. Perhaps he was too angry to care.
Within a short distance at an intersection that he knew very well, he lost control of the vehicle, hit a tree, and was killed. Somewhere in between leaving the house and hitting that tree, his gun had fired 1 shot. And there was never any explanation for when or how, at whom that gun could have been fired.
Pickaway County Sheriff Dwight Radcliffe, who declined to be interviewed for this story, supposedly investigated and eliminated at least 1 suspect. He then ruled Ron Gillespie's death an accident. But several Circleville residents soon received anonymous letters saying that Sheriff Radcliffe was perpetrating a cover-up. First of all, the sheriff agreed with me there was foul play. And then when I contacted him again, he changed his attitude completely. Then he was telling me that it wasn't foul play, that it was the suspect had passed a polygraph test.
Gillespie had 0.16% alcohol, which would in Ohio be 1.5 times the legal limit. Most people I've talked to said that he was not a heavy drinker and were surprised by that kind of finding.
Was Ron Gillespie's death an accident? Was he really drunk that night? And why had 1 bullet been fired from his handgun? 6 years after the death of Ron Gillespie, the Circleville, Ohio letter writer was still waging his or her vicious campaign. The initial targets, Ron's wife Mary and the superintendent of schools, eventually acknowledged a relationship. But both claimed it had begun after the letters rather than before. Mary was still driving a school bus to support her family. In 1983, the letter writer began to put up signs along her bus route. Finally, Mary's daughter was targeted. Mary Gillespie had had enough.
She ripped the sign down. Much to her surprise, behind the sign was this box and some string and also another post that was attached to the fence post. She took it into the bus and she opened up this rather unusual sized box. As she opened it up, there was a small pistol.
On closer examination, Mary realized that it was a crude booby trap designed to fire the gun at her. An amateurish attempt had been made to rub the serial number off the handgun. When lab tests were able to raise it again, the case took an incredible turn. The gun belonged to Mary Gillespie's brother-in-law, Paul Freshour, who had just split up with Ron's sister.
I admitted the gun was mine, but I hadn't seen it for a long time. I'd had no reason to check up on it or anything, and I don't know when it come up missing. I really don't know what happened to it. And I told him that, and it's, it's the truth. And that's how it was.
On February 25th, 1983, Sheriff Radcliffe called Paul Freshour in for questioning and asked him to take a handwriting test.
We don't have all the answers we'd like to have just yet, okay? What I'd like you to do is take this.
Under the impression he was helping to protect another family member, Paul agreed. The sheriff told him only that the missing gun was somehow linked to the Circleville letters.
This is an actual letter. I want you to copy as closely as you can on the pad what you see here. In other words, write what they have written. He would give me an actual letter and ask me maybe to do the envelope part just as near as I could in the envelope. And then on some, he would take the actual letter out and have me do them as near as I could on the letters from what, from right there in front of me. And I did them because I knew I wasn't responsible for the letters. And I knew that evidence would come. And then he dictated letters, and he asked me to, recopy in my mind the same way on this dictation as I had recopied from the actual letters and envelopes. Everyone is talking. He made sure that I did them, in the reference of how I copied it, because that was very important to him. And I did the best I could and turned everything into it.
That is not the proper way to test to see if someone has a certain writing style, because if they're copying from a letter, they're going to try to emulate the style. So, and the experts said that the testing was improper. So they didn't really say that these letters were written by Paul Freshour. They said that they could have been.
Right, pardon the mess, but I'm going to try to keep it a little cleaner than this.
After the handwriting test, the still unsuspecting Paul Freshour took Sheriff Radcliffe to his garage.
Sometimes I used to keep it up here, and then on top of the refrigerator.
Paul showed the sheriff where he had kept his gun. Afterwards, the two men returned to the courthouse.
He called in the prosecutor and told the prosecutor there was my writing on the booby trap. And then the prosecutor, that's the one that actually told me that there was a booby trap found, and I was under arrest for attempted murder and placed on a $50,000 cash bond.
On October 24th, 1983, Paul Freshour went on trial for the attempted murder of his sister-in-law, Mary Gillespie. Even though Paul wasn't charged with writing the threatening letters, they became a crucial part of the evidence against him. What you are about to hear is verbatim testimony from court transcripts.
And did you explain to the handwriting analyst how you went about obtaining the samples?
Yes, I did.
And did he indicate which part of these he would actually use in his analysis?
The ones he dictated were the ones that would be used for comparison, not the ones he copied.
It is my opinion that the handwriting of the envelopes, documents, and postcards was printed by the same person, it being the known handwriting or handprinting of Paul Freshour.
Have you at any time suspected the defendant of being the one responsible for writing these letters and putting these signs up?
Not at first.
Well, when was your first indication that you had where someone indicated that it could possibly be him?
It was August of 1982, and his wife came to see me and indicated it might be a possibility.
This is the weekly time record for Paul Freshour for the week ending 2/12/83.
And what days was Paul Freshour working that week?
Mr. Freshour worked Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of that week.
Did he work Monday?
No, he did not.
And
the Monday in question was the very day that Mary Gillespie had found the sign and booby trap. Even though Paul Freshour had an alibi for almost the entire day, he never took the stand in his own defense. It was a decision which Paul would come to regret.
We, the jury, find the defendant Paul L. Freshour guilty of attempted murder. We further find and specify that the defendant did have a firearm under his control.
I couldn't believe it. I was just in shock. And I know they put in some good evidence, and there was evidence withheld, but still yet. I mean, I can't blame the jury because the jury didn't hear all the evidence. And I was just, I just couldn't believe it. I was really in shock, and I was probably in shock for a year after I was in prison. Unbelievable. Paul Freshour was given the maximum sentence for attempted murder, 7 to 25 years. Everyone assumed Paul had written the Circleville letters, and everyone assumed that with Paul behind bars, the letters would stop. Everyone was wrong.
They were being received all over a large area of central Ohio. So a lot of people couldn't understand how Paul Freshour could be mailing all these letters from prison.
Following repeated complaints from Sheriff Radcliffe, Paul was placed in solitary confinement. Still, the letters continued. All of them were postmarked Columbus, even though Paul was imprisoned in Lima, Ohio, 200 miles away.
Lima, that's just
You go into a single man cell, and that's it. It's nothing in there with you. No pencils, no papers, no nothing. Restrictions, you wouldn't believe. Pat down, cell searches, visit monitoring, mail in, going out, going mail, always examined and tested. Maybe some days I'd get my mail, maybe some days I wouldn't.
We have, of course, reviewed your file in preference to your visit with us today. And although we find some nice things about you in the file, there are also some things that concern us a great deal.
After 7 years in prison, Paul Freshour became eligible for parole. In the weeks preceding his hearing, the volume of anonymous letters increased dramatically. Despite the Columbus postmarks, the letters worked against Paul. He was denied parole, even though he was universally regarded as a model prisoner. A few days later, the letter writer sadistically wrote a letter to Paul himself.
Now, when are you going to believe you aren't going to get out of there? I told you 2 years ago, when we set them up, they stay set up. Don't you listen at all? No one wants you out. No one. The joke is on you. Ha, ha.
Full-scale investigations were conducted twice, possibly 3 times, during which Paul Freshour was put into isolation, and the warden of the prison he was in during one of these investigations then wrote a letter to Paul's wife saying that as far as he was concerned, it was impossible for Paul to be writing these letters and sending them from prison.
When Martin Yap reviewed the sheriff's investigative file, he uncovered evidence never mentioned at the trial, which he believes might have kept Paul Freshour out of prison altogether.
Mary Gillespie told the sheriff that one of the other bus drivers told her that she had been driving that same road about 20 minutes before Mary Gillespie found that booby trap at exactly that site. And when she went by that very same intersection, there was a yellow El Camino parked there. A large man with sandy hair was standing there. When he saw her come, he turned around and acted like he was going to the bathroom or something, but seemed also to be avoiding any kind of identification. The description of the individual does not fit Paul Freshour at all, and Paul had a very solid alibi for this time of day. There was no attempt at all to follow up on that lead. And if they had, as I say, they would have found that another possible suspect in this case had a brother who had a yellow El Camino.
In May of 1994, Paul Freshour was finally granted parole after serving 10 years. To this day, he staunchly maintains his innocence, and he is sure that the real criminal is still at large.
I'd really like to see someone really look at this case on the letters. Reopen the letter part of it and get in and find out who wrote the letters. I'd also like to see someone look into this, to my former brother-in-law's death. Look, that's not my family anymore, and that's my past. I'm not even gonna look back at it. I've got a new family and a new future, but I still would like to see someone look at that accident real close in the letters. And that's what I believe.
So many questions remain in this most bizarre case. Who did write the Circleville letters? At whom did Ron Gillespie fire his gun? Did that person kill Ron? Who was responsible for the booby trap found by Mary Gillespie? And finally, who stole Paul Freshour's pistol? When we return, Agatha Christie, the world's most renowned mystery writer, becomes a focal point of her own tantalizing unsolved mystery. In 1823, the poet Lord Byron wrote, "Truth is always strange, stranger than fiction." Just over a century later, the great mystery writer Agatha Christie, author of such famous novels as Murder on the Orient Express and 10 Little Indians, would prove that Byron was right. You see, when Agatha was 36 years old, she became the subject of her own real-life unsolved mystery, demonstrating that truth is not only stranger than fiction, often is directly related. On the morning of December 4th, 1926, Agatha Christie's car was found abandoned, about an hour's drive from her home on the outskirts of London. Agatha had apparently vanished into thin air, but some suspected the worst, that her husband Archie had done her in.
The press was fascinated, so was the public. Agatha was a famous woman. She was known to be a mistress of mysteries. This was a real-life mystery.
The story was taken up with great glee by newspapers around England. What had become of Agatha Christie? How could one of the most well-known women in the country have disappeared off the face of the earth? She was born Agatha Miller in 1890. Her father was a wealthy American, her mother a proper British lady. Agatha was raised in the moneyed upper middle class of English society. In 1914, Agatha broke an existing engagement to marry Colonel Archibald Christie, a dashing pilot in the Royal Flying Corps. Archie had pursued Agatha aggressively, even though many thought they were opposites in every way.
Everybody tells me it's a bad idea. It's the war. They get married on Christmas Day. And he immediately goes off to the war. A very, very traditional and romantic tale.
While Archie was fighting in the skies over France, Agatha worked as a nurse and in her spare time launched a writing career, creating the famous Belgian detective H. Hercule Poirot. Agatha's first book, published 4 years after the war, was called The Mysterious Affair at Styles.
That first book was a sensation. She didn't expect anything like that. And nobody expected it from a rather plump, placid, ordinary-looking girl. She hit the jackpot straight away.
The next 3 or 4 books did a little better each time. And then with her 5th book, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, she really hits the big time.
In 1926, Agatha, Archie, and their young daughter Rosa moved into a mansion which they named Styles after Agatha's first novel. Archie had been successful in his own right, a retired war hero turned investment banker. On the surface, the Christies looked like the picture-perfect family.
Archie was a real stockbroker. He was a British, proper, upper crust, boring man who looked good. He was extremely conventional.
I go for the weekend. Care to join me?
I don't believe I can.
That's your man.
Agatha looked conventional, but inside she wasn't. Inside, she wanted more.
Later in 1926, when Agatha's mother, Clara, died, the strained civility of Agatha and Archie's marriage cracked.
Agatha was absolutely distraught for the death of her mother. I think she had really never left the mother's side, and this is possibly one of the reasons why the marriage wasn't a great success. That she still remained very much a family girl. And when the mother died, it really unhinged her a bit.
Agatha took Rosalind and her nanny to Ashfield, a rambling Edwardian home where Agatha had grown up. Ostensibly, the move was temporary, to sort through her late mother's possessions, but it dragged on for weeks. Archie stayed away. Agatha's grief for her mother was too deep to fathom.
At 36, I think most women would mourn their mothers, but with Agatha Christie, it wasn't just sorrow. It was something approaching melancholia. It was an almost pathological condition, I think. And so she lived at Ashfield in this terrible sense of disorientation, physical stress, with no one to confide in, looking forward to the point when Archie would come down and celebrate with her their daughter's birthday.
Agatha, please do sit down. The birthday celebration did not play out as Agatha had hoped.
Agatha, I want you to give me a divorce.
A divorce?
That's what I want.
No, Archie. Absolutely not. Never.
That's what I want, Agatha. I will not be moved.
It seemed that Archie had become involved with a woman named Nancy Neal.
Well, this was absolutely devastation for her. She had been betrayed. She never thought that a man could do this to her. I think she would have even lived without Archie having a mistress. But the fact that he wanted to divorce her destroyed her.
In a last-ditch effort to save her marriage, Agatha took Rosalind and moved back home.
I think you should stay at Styles this weekend, Archie. We could spend some time alone together.
Excuse me.
On December 3rd, 1926, Archie took off alone, bound for a weekend house party. By some accounts, Archie and Agatha argued bitterly before he left. Agatha must have suspected that he planned to rendezvous with Nancy Neal. With Archie gone, Agatha was left to stew in her own misery.
Either at 9:30 at night or around 11 o'clock at night, according to different reports, she left the house in something of a state. The maids were alarmed by the way she went out. We know that she took with her a small traveling case and that she wore her fur coat.
Agatha left behind at least 2 notes. One was addressed to her secretary, asking that she cancel Agatha's weekend appointments. Another, of unknown content, was addressed to Archie. The next morning, Agatha's abandoned car was found just an hour's drive from Styles.
Again, the exact time seems to be in doubt. It had gone off the side of the road. It was not turned over. There had been no big accident.
A local man found the car on his way to work, sir. The license was in her case. That's how we know it's Mrs. Christie. Her coat's still in the car, sir.
Whole night to be out without a coat.
Very cold indeed, sir. This is no luggage, sir. One small bag. 3 dresses, 2 pairs of shoes, and this, sir.
Very nice. Thank you, Constable.
Archie Christie had been tracked down at his house party. He made an unfortunate appearance at the very moment the authorities were beginning to suspect foul play.
Superintendent? Well, Christie, who are all these people?
Oh, just curious.
They've got to be here. Too late to stop them now, sir. They know the gist of it already.
Colonel Christie, have you any idea where your wife might be?
No, sir, none. I haven't a clue.
Pardon me for asking, but where were you last night?
I was away. With friends.
You were?
Yes, Superintendent, I was.
Excuse me, sorry to bother you. Just one question about Colonel. Just one question. Was the Colonel asking for a degree?
The press had already gotten the wind of the event.
Away from the house and keep it.
The superintendent went to Stein to question Agatha's secretary and other staff members. No one was able to shed any light on Agatha's strange disappearance.
Have you spoken to the staff?
Yes, sir, I have. The police
Christie
launched
left.
vigorous attempts to find a body. There is a small pool nearby called the Silent Pool, which Agatha had in fact used in one of her previous stories. And this is dragged, I think, at least twice. They enrolled the public and I think even parts of the army in kind of beating the bushes, quite literally.